I'd love to maybe start actually talking about what AI means at Facebook. First, from an organizational perspective, like who's the team? What do people do? How many offices? How many researchers? That type of things.
Sure, I can respond. Well, thanks for having me, Matt. I wish we could have met face-to-face like last time in New York. It's always a pleasure to go there, but this is a good alternative. I'm glad we made it happen. So AI Facebook is a pretty big endeavor, right? So you're thinking of thousands of engineers and researchers who, for the majority of the time, work on ML systems. Now, my team is kind of the core AI team, which role is really to advance AI, and we do really three different things. One is we work with products to make some big product advances, and I know we're going to talk about that today. Some of them you're interested in, but things like, hey, how do you moderate what's happening on Facebook automatically? How do you do ranking recommendation for both ads and the content? When you fire up your Instagram app or your Facebook apps, this is basically determined by a pretty sophisticated deep learning algorithm. And then also looking at the future, things like augmented reality or some new endeavors like commerce or remote presence are two big things. So big product pillar. The second thing we do, and hopefully a lot of people here have heard about it, is develop some new system for ourselves and for the community. So we have a big open source approach. We are the developers of PyTorch, and we think this is really a community program. So not only we develop this, but we actually try to engage as much as possible the community. And our goal for us is really to rethink the way software engineering is done in the age of machine learning. So it's PyTorch, it's all the models around it, but also all the systems around PyTorch. And there's a lot of work to be done there, and we can talk about it if you're interested. And then the third pillar, which many people maybe know more about, is the research pillar. So the AI team, the AI effort actually at Facebook was launched 6 years ago with Jan LeCun joining the team, recruited by Mark. Jan is still in the team. He's my chief scientist. He's still very involved. And there we're really trying to just advance the state of the art in AI.
That's fair, right? That's
the fair piece. Well, I also have an applied research team. So there's a fundamental research team, which is fair, that Jan had created, and also an applied research team. So we're really trying to move the state of the art, both in like the science piece and the applied piece.
So you have this lab piece, but you also have like embedded machine learning and AI people that work with product teams in the various units. Is that how that works?
Right. So there are a lot of people in my team that actually work with the common goals with product teams, but there are also a lot of ML engineers who are actually in the product team. Actually there are more ML engineers outside my team than within. But most of the research, I would say, in AI is done within my team, that's for sure.
And maybe to give us a sense of scale, so I think I read somewhere that FAIR, so just the FAIR part had like 300 researchers across 8 offices. Is that still accurate?
Yeah, we don't share, but you're, yes, ballpark is good. Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, if you look at AI at Facebook, it's thousands of engineers and researchers, and a good fraction of that is in the AI team.
And maybe to this point and to anchor that conversation very much from the beginning, I think one idea that I've heard again, and I'd love for you to confirm or not, it's very much that Facebook ultimately is very much an AI company, meaning that there are certain companies that use a little bit of AI on top, on the side, for features to do different things. But like at this stage, Facebook is completely an AI company and specifically a deep learning company. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean they're pretty much deep learning system in every single Facebook product, and they are very much at the core of them. I mean, the most obvious one is obviously Facebook and Instagram, the Facebook app and Instagram. They have AI at the core, right? The whole experience is driven by AI algorithm. And then obviously, as I mentioned, the whole moderation is driven by that. I think what's more recent and is coming more to the surface is what we call AI experiences. So things that are driven by AI in a more visible way. So that's the kind of things you're going to see a lot more in the forthcoming future. And we'll talk about it today. So I think AI was a lot behind the scene. I think in companies like Facebook or Google, AI has been behind the scene and really at the core of the engine of the product for many years now. But in the past year, I would say now you start seeing AI really at the forefront, driving the experience as well.
Interesting. All right, so much to talk about. New products, new AI features, new open source project, even a public Twitter beef with Elon Musk that you had about the AGI. We'll talk about that at the end. A fascinating topic. Maybe let's start with moderation, which is a debate that's very much on top of everyone's mind. So maybe to start, can you maybe walk us through the history of sort of the arms race between Facebook trying to moderate comments and people trying to sort of outwit Facebook and again and again over the last few years?
Sure. I mean, moderation is it's always a partnership between humans and computers, right? So we have actually 30,000 moderators that try to really understand if the content that's published on a platform satisfies our policy. But 30,000, given the amount of content, you're talking about billions of pieces of content every day, is not enough. So in great part, actually, many of the identification, the flagging, and the action is done by AI today. And it's a fantastic AI problem because it's extremely complicated to understand deeply what's happening. And it's also an arm race because there is some aspects that are adversarial. So you can really think of it as us throwing everything we have at it in terms of, we use really the most advanced AI possible. So if you think of, a system like, what we call like XLM, XLMR, which is, hey, we're trying to create this really large language model leveraging transformers. There are multilingual at the source, so we try to learn 100 languages at the same time in a single model using transformer architecture. And that really gives you like a base understanding of language. And then on top of that, you start creating some tasks. Figure out if something is hate speech or if it's offensive content or if it's bullying. So we try to really have a very refined understanding of language. That's one axis. The second is we look holistically at what's happening on the platform. So what we call like multimodal approach to it. So when you look at a post, right, you have the person posting it, you have all the metadata attached to it. You may have it maybe a video attached with some text. So more and more, and I don't know if you actually, I think I sent you a little bit of a slide on this, but we have this view of trying to bring all the signal in a single, basically, network, trying to identify something really satisfied our policy or not, right? So that's what we call multimodal, which is becoming a lot more in fashion in AI, but especially relevant for this problem of automated moderation. So that's the second approach. The third thing we're trying to do is we're also trying to engage the community. So
just to make sure I understand this one, the multimodal. So multimodal means so you could have, and I don't know if you had that slide or not, but you could have an image that says one thing, but the text around the image actually ends up meaning exactly the opposite thing of the image. That's the more technical.
Right, that's the slide here. And so just the idea. So first, the idea is there is like, hey, you bring in a fusion model, all the signal that you have, the image, the video, the text, and the aspect of interaction, the actor, etc., right? All the metadata. So that's the approach. Now, there's a very interesting application. So it's a good transition to what I was about to talk about, which is we are trying to engage the community into these problems. Okay. Last year, we launched what's called a Defect detection challenge, trying to get people to really do this complex task we've seen coming, which people are trying to create content, that's synthetic and sometimes misleading. How do you identify that? We just launched another challenge, which is the hateful meme challenge. So hateful memes are exactly an example of what you mentioned, which is you may have a text that seems completely innocuous. You may have an image that may seem completely innocuous, and you put the two together, and it's extremely offensive, right? And it's actually policy violating. So this is one of the challenges, right? You need to have the full context to understand if that meme is really satisfying your policy or it means something really horrifying that you don't want on the platform.
Great. Can we talk about, you guys did some really interesting work or are partnering with third parties, as you mentioned, around the virus, around COVID. So in particular, in terms of trying to detect what is legitimate information versus not. And I read some stuff around SimSearchNet and other things. Can you maybe expand on that?
Yes, that's obviously another thing that's quite important for us, is to try to moderate the content on our platform in an open way, right? We are trying to make sure that people can have free speech, that they can discuss their views. But when we identify information that's completely misleading, we try to, if you want, fingerprint it, and then figure out what claims it's made, and then figure out all the content that's actually very similar to this. So we work often with fact-checking organization, and then when they flag content that should be at least shown as a misleading, then we have this very advanced similarity algorithm that kind of like look at an embedding of the content itself. Again, it can be the image itself or multimodal aspect of things, and then try to tell you all the other content that's very similar, so that we can have much faster action on our platform. And if you identify one piece of content, you can remove all the content that are very similar, even if it has been kind of modified or tempered ways, or it's like the same version of the same claims.
Mm-hmm. So you partner with organization to find like a version of the truth, and then use machine learning and AI to find other documents that correspond to that truth.
That's right, or more like content that should be flagged as being misleading, in this case.
Okay. Okay. And then deep fake is a absolutely fascinating problem. You mentioned it. So so your approach is to partner with developers around the world, because it's presumably such a complex problem. I saw that you had a prize with this organization called Driven Data. So not data driven, but drivendata.org. Any thoughts on where this whole thing is going, whether that's going to be possible to detect those, or what's your vision of the future of deepfakes, I guess?
It's a really good question. So on one hand, it's just no question that the tempered content like this will become more prevalent on platform. So we're trying to be really ahead of the game. And again, creating this competition, trying to figure out how we can detect this. We're going to announce actually the results of the Defect challenge in the coming weeks. So to see that, I think through the challenge, we saw tremendous progress, right? So people were able actually to figure out ways to detect this. And just in a few months, you could see that progress through the leaderboard. It's never going to be a soft problem, right? So it's always going to be an arm race. So I'm confident that we can actually identify part of it. I think we can act on it. We can label it in the case when it matters to users. But I'm also confident that it's going to be an ongoing problem, and it's not going to disappear tomorrow. In some way, this is a problem that has always been around, right? Even when you had the printing press, how do you detect that people make misleading claims, or when people could communicate? So this is part of our mandate, to make sure that we can identify as much as possible, act on it, label it, especially make people conscious of what they're seeing, and keep them informed.
Right. Any from a technical standpoint, any promising approach? Is that a brute force exercise around data, and like the more videos you have, the smarter the algorithms becomes, or are there like different ways you can do things? Any promising approach?
I haven't seen the actual error analysis at the end, so I don't know the actual view. I mean, there are multiple approaches you can do. Some is you can try to find the original content that has been modified. So that's one approach, right? You try to get, it's back to a little bit what I was mentioning earlier, which is we try to figure out similarities with that content. The other is you have a pretty good understanding of the artifacts of the algorithm that are used today, right? So when a deep learning algorithm generates a deepfake, it leaves some kind of signature, or has some kind of like side effects to the content you can try to identify. So there are a lot of aspect like this. It's pretty clear that the approach we will use will be an ensemble technique that combine all these understanding what's out before, looking at understanding the algorithm, also looking at the multimodality aspect, right? Because you also have, hey, who posted the video? What's the behavior? What's the context around it?
Great. So plenty of new products at Facebook around AI. So Shops was a big announcement recently, very exciting and interesting. Do you want to talk about the AI part of this and the universal product understanding model? Is one of the notes I took. What does it do, and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, being at Facebook during COVID has been quite interesting, right? So I've been 3 months in, and we basically launched 2 offerings because of it in the middle of it, even though we just had to all learn to work remotely. So it's been quite an interesting adventure, I gotta say. I've never seen this before. You know, there's such a drive. So you're right. Actually, I think we launched.
Just to make sure, the launch was accelerated by COVID of those.
Oh yeah. This thing is not in the plans before.
Is that all right?
Yes, this is quite amazing. So you have the way we looked at it, right? Actually, the company is really trying to prioritize 3 things right now. So one is that there's all the COVID threads. You know, some of the things you mentioned. I mean, some of the side is making sure the information actually is correct on our platform, right? We can moderate this. The other is also we're trying to help with COVID aspects. So I don't know if you heard of this thing called symptom survey. So we partner with Carnegie Mellon to try to really understand, hey, what are the symptoms that people are self-evaluating? And so to try to get basically a model to the policymakers to understand what's happening, right? Another part of that is actually FAIR, you know, my research team is really pushing to try to create like predictive models on top of that information, on top of mobility data as well, to try to really understand what's happening with COVID. And as we are reopening, you know, what are the policies that will lead to making the, you know, R factor greater than 1 or keeping it under 1. So we have a big thread around COVID. Another big thread in the company is that as people have been at home, the usage of our platform has gone, you know, up like crazy. So not only we were all at home, but we had to deal with actually people using our service a lot more, which put a lot of strain on our system. I mean, basically the growth that happened in just a matter of a month was what we predicted would happen over more than a year. So it really took us by surprise, but you know, it's good. One of these usage that was really remarkable was remote presence, right? With the use of video conference. And obviously everybody has seen also the real big pickup of Zoom as well, right? So something that we have noticed as well. So that actually made us react there and really prioritize. This is some things that we had been in the pipeline, but they were not planned for anytime soon. And to accelerate our effort around having like a cross platform, you know, video conference system that was really robust, you know, and we launched this idea of Facebook Rooms, which is you can connect with it even without a Facebook account from like your computer, from your phone. So that actually was a really, really interesting thing. I'm based in New York, you know, as you know, and most of the company is, a lot of people in the company are in California. So I've been a big proponent of leveraging, you know, remote presence tool a lot more. So I'm really happy that we are investing a lot in there. But the cool thing also in there is that remote presence, to make the experience really awesome, you need to use a lot of AI. It may not be as visible, but AI can make the experience a lot interesting. I sent you actually an interesting video, maybe we can share it. So one of the features we launched, which I think is pretty cool, is obviously with Zoom, people know about this background. You're using one right now. And one thing that the company had invested a lot on is, this is the lightning one. Okay, yeah, that's you want to play it. So this is actually a background. It looks like it's real, but it's actually a completely artificial background here, right? So it's really using our augmented reality platform to change there and make it look like you're in place, right? So then the cool thing about it is that as you're moving around, right, it's not a static background. It makes it look like you are in an environment. Actually, internally, we even deployed one that has the Facebook office for all the nostalgia, because none of us have been in the Facebook office. So you can make it look like you're actually walking around the office. So it's a pretty good feature. And it shows you actually this feature, all the things potentially to come on the intersection of remote presence, AI, and AR. So this is actually kind of a step toward virtual reality, augmented reality. Imagine, for example, if everybody in that video had the same background, right? And then it looks like, hey, you're all in the same room. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can tweak the sound so that it makes it look like the sound comes from the person. There's a sense of space in that room. So that's a big direction. The other cool stuff, obviously, is to make the experience a lot more pleasurable, you know, like remove all the background sounds that are distracting, make sure that when people are on mute, they know about it and, you know, how to mute. have reactions. So one thing we're working on is, hey, can you do a thumbs up? And the system actually recognizes that gesture. It's something we worked a lot before and we're pushing. So there's a whole range of things, a feature that we are planning to push in this year actually. But we launched a room just a few weeks ago. It has actually the background there like this on iOS right now. We're working on it for Android and desktop, but it's a very, very exciting field. And then the last one is what you mentioned is shops. And there the vision which came from Mark directly was, hey, this is a really tough time for SMBs, for small and medium businesses. How can we make it easier for them to reach out customers? So that was the idea behind allowing people to make a shopping experience very, very quickly, right? And one aspect of that experience is about, hey, I can take any picture, right? So if my customers post something in my own product, then the system will immediately recognize that and tag the product. So we've created this pretty advanced model that looks at very detailed feature that take care of occlusion, because when you have a product on a picture, usually people didn't pay attention. They don't try to take a picture directly of it. It may be occluded. It means part of it may be hidden by another things. So we are a pretty advanced system for image segmentation and video segmentation, and then image recognition. But there we push it to the next level by looking at, hey, it's not just objects and the type of object, it's also the specific product, right? And we're spending a lot of time on fashion. It's obviously a big thing on Instagram. Looking also at furniture, because people can present things in their own home and see how it would play out. And obviously people are spending a lot more time on their home. So that's the idea behind this. Make pretty much any image out there part of the image inventory of small and medium businesses, so that they can point to it and we can tag their product, so they can point to that experience and let people understand what the product looks in that context.
Amazing. So that's out and that's functioning, and that's or is that are you building those features?
We have it functioning. It'll be launched in months. Yep. Yes. Now we see the background I mentioned. This is something that's live. You can see it there, and the shopping stuff will happen in the coming months.
So we can all go play with it after this if we haven't already done so. Okay. Another theme we had alluded to, let's chat a little bit about open source. I think that's what Facebook has done around open sourcing. A lot of the innovation that you guys came up with has been quite remarkable. So maybe walk us through the general philosophy and around so much openness.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, I would say Facebook is one of the top two company out there leveraging AI, right? So for us, actually, we're not selling AI. We're not a vendor. We don't have a cloud offering. We have no plans of having one. And we have major problems. I mentioned, hateful memes. I mentioned deepfakes. I mentioned moderating our platform. We're also trying to, go towards augmented reality. So for us, it's really essential that AI makes progress. It will really help us and it will help our business. So the strategy I've taken, and I have support from Shrek, the CTO, my boss, and his boss, Mark, is to kind of go all in on openness and open source, right? So obviously PyTorch is one of our flagship projects at the moment, and we're really trying to build a community around this. But not only that, we're really trying to incentivize people to share their models. So we've taken an approach to be very open and try to put all our research models, and even actually the base often of our production models, that is machine translation or language models or speech models or vision models or vision system out there, so that people can build on top of it and keep improving them, and we can reap the benefit of this improvement. And we really believe that it can help the community improve, okay? The second thing that I feel very passionate about, and that's something I was very passionate before joining Facebook, and I joined people at Facebook like Jan or Joel Pinot who are very passionate about it, is really this idea of reproducibility in AI, right? I mean, there's so much buzz about AI, and a lot of that buzz, some of that is justified. I mean, there's no question. In my opinion, we're not going to go to any AI winter anytime soon. The use of AI is exploding. It's real, but people make a lot of claims, like that it's human level. There's a lot of companies out there or others who make this claim, and we don't want to do that. We really want to make it very easy for people to say, hey, okay, this is what my system does, and this is how you can reproduce it. We believe it's good for two things, right? One is to cut the buzz, like people can actually, verify for themselves what the performance is, and also it helps people build on top of what other people have done, right? So we have a really big push around, being open source, putting not only the systems out there, but the models, and then, making it really easy for people to reproduce on their own infrastructure the results of the whole community. So we made a lot of announcements around this. We see where, did a little acquisition with Paper with Code. We are pushing very much on this. We're partnering with conferences around, the reproducibility checklist, trying to
So you're partnering with AWS, right, on the PyTorch release.
Oh, and that's another aspect, which is we're really trying to create a community, including actually partnering with, we're partnering with Google, we're partnering with Amazon, we're partnering with Microsoft, and making sure that all their cloud platform can integrate all the PyTorch system very well, and then that they adapt their hardware to it. Like for example, we announced PyTorch working on TPU. So that was a good announcement. And then as you mentioned, yes, Torch Serve, which came from AWS, right? So our view is that, hey, we should not be just the only committer in the community. We want to welcome a lot of people to contribute to the community and make it the most thriving possible.
Yeah, and one recent open source release that looked super interesting is BlenderBot. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, BlenderBot is absolutely like my one of my favorite, actually. I sent you actually a few interactions, so I can tell you a lot about, I don't know if you want to share that. Maybe we could put them for people to look. So
BlenderBot is a chatbot, right?
Yeah, so BlenderBot is a chatbot, and it's a combination really of two things, right? So it's leveraging a lot of the research that we have done in our team, and one led by the group that Jason Weston put together, around really understanding what makes dialogue engaging and what are the pitfalls that dialogue falls into. So dialogue tends to be, I don't know if you can add that, that's not this one.
That was a dialogue with little bubbles.
Yeah, there's a dialogue with little bubbles. Maybe you have it in the different email there.
All right, we'll find it.
It's really about, figuring out what makes dialogue engaging, right? Often chatbots tend to be quickly off topic, or they try to kind of like give you the same response all over, or they repeat themselves, or so there are a lot of pitfalls, and the team has really studied very hard and created some really specialized data set and training data sets to train a bot. And then plus on top of that, there's been a lot of advances around very large language models and transformers, right? And the junction of the two gave us BlenderBot. And it's a really interesting bot where you can have literally, half an hour conversation with it without getting bored, right? The system has huge knowledge, so we train. It's the largest chat model out there. It's 9 billion parameters. It integrates a lot of knowledge, so it kind of integrated a lot of, oops, okay, sharing another one here. And we decided to take that model and, sorry, I'm a little distracted by the, I had actually sent it in my email body if you want to put it.
I'll go back and find it. Sorry about that.
All right, no, don't worry. The system doesn't have any rule into it, right? So when you interact with something like Alexa or Google Home today, right, this system basically do intent recognition, and then they have a very scripted dialogue after this, right? So usually you recognize what are the steps, and it's very limited because you can have no more than 1 or 2 turns. BlenderBot, on the contrary, is completely trained from scratch. Yeah, so this is kind of like the interaction, and if you can read it. So this is an interaction where I ask, the bot to talk to me about ancient Greece, okay? And it knows some kind of interesting things about that, around schools of philosophy or stuff like that. And then after that, I ask it about tea, and it knows about a different kind of tea, right? But none of that was actually injected in the system, right? It just learned, actually, in this case, it learned from some specific data we put together and learned from Reddit. It's not ready for prime consumption, let's be clear. Like these bots have lots of interesting side effects. You cannot really control what they're going to say, but they're quite entertaining, quite engaging, and a lot more human-like than you'd expect. It still doesn't mean that they understand full reasoning. They don't have a lot of common sense. They don't have actually a lot of memory at the moment, but they are really, really engaging and entertaining. So that was the latest. And then we think there's a lot more work that needs to be done for this to be useful. And we think there's a whole new market of things that can be created. And that's why we release it completely open source. And the model is available for anybody to try and build on. It's not ready for prime time. It's not ready for products, but it's definitely really interesting for research.
Very cool. And you mentioned CPU a minute ago. I actually love to talk about hardware a little bit. In watching the various videos you have online, as I was preparing for this, you had one where you made the point that actually many people may not completely realize, which is that the sheer cost in terms of like hardware, cloud consumption, and all the things of running those, super high profile sort of brute force exercises, to beat games and that type of thing that get, a lot of press, is becoming incredible. And that actually one of the barriers to the progress of that type of method is actually very much cost related. Can you talk a little bit about the cost, the hardware, and I guess the evolution towards using maybe more CPU as opposed to GPU?
Yeah, so definitely what's interesting about deep learning today, which is still surprising, is that scale works, right? So you can take system, and as you scale them up, the performance goes up, and it's actually quite surprising to everybody, and including to me and many expert, that we still see a lot of gains through scale. So I mentioned BlenderBot. BlenderBot is 9 billion parameters, which a few years back would have been hard to conceive. So that is one of the challenges. Is that it's working. OpenAI had actually shown, a nice blog post where they had shown that actually, if you take the top models out there, they tend to increase that in terms of size or in terms of actually hardware consumption by 10x a year. Now, and if you look at utilization within Facebook, right, the use of resources for ML is definitely exponential, right? Now, there's this little law out there, which is like all exponential laws will stop at some point. You cannot continue because at some point you're going to consume all the atom in the universe, and that includes this one. So, so there are many different direction when this needs to go. One direction you mentioned CPU. We're definitely using more than CPUs, and we're using GPUs, and we're looking into dedicated hardware as well. But you need to try to really improve the consumption of this model. So I think that's a field that's increasing, which is you need to make the models more efficient, and we need to start looking at the trade-off of accuracy versus efficiency. Right? I think a lot of the field, including my team, has looked a lot at one aspect of it, which is like, hey, let's improve the performance from an accuracy perspective, but we need to look at the efficiency of this model as well and look at the trade-off between the two, right? So that's a big effort. The second is, hey, you're looking at leveraging hardware and different types of hardware. CPU is obviously the most commodity one, but leveraging GPU, building super clusters of GPUs, so that's something we spend a lot of time in, and leveraging at times dedicated hardware as well, right? So we are actually going on these three fronts. And the third is that we're still researching, larger. So as much as we're constrained, I am still pushing my team to say, hey, what is the next advance we can get by scaling this up, and how we're going to scale this up. So we're still pushing hard, but it's not going to be 10x per year. It's just not sustainable. That's why, I was quoted at some point saying, hey, we're going to hit a wall. I was just stating the obvious, which is a rule that's 10x a wall is not going to continue forever. And at some point it's going to stop, or it's going to diminish in growth. And we have to look at these other aspects I mentioned, hardware acceleration or making the system more efficient.
Yeah. Thank you. And maybe just like anchor this in people's minds. I mean, obviously not talking about anything specific about Facebook. The cost of like running those like inferences at scale, just like one go, can be in the millions, right? Is that correct?
Well, not one utilization from one user, but often we talk like I think what has really increased lately has been also the training costs. Actually, to be clear, the most costly thing we do in ML is still inference cost, because when you put a piece of content within Facebook, it's running hundreds of different ML-based algorithms, and they all run obviously in parallel. and it's using a huge number of machine, when every time you post something, right? So obviously it's not a million per post. Where it becomes millions is when you do training runs. So some of the training runs in the most advanced system that it comes from our company or other companies out there are starting to be extremely expensive. Yeah, like you can look at one run in the scale that you're mentioning, and that's not sustainable, including for companies like Facebook.
Great. So we talked about hardware progress, making models more efficient, all the things. So a little bit to the public beef with Elon and on Twitter. So what's your sense of where things are going in terms of AGI, so meaning general intelligence, what's realistic, what's not realistic, what's the sort of like the from the ultimate experts and pros in the field, like what's the current sentiment about what's doable, what's not doable?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about that, I try to really have a balanced view, right? Because I'm concerned that people make claims out there that gives a distorted view of the reality, right? So I'm trying to communicate really three things. So the first thing is that, look, we are nowhere near human level intelligence, right? So the system that we're creating, I mean, I talk about BlendBot. It's a really fun system. It's really amazing what we are, but quickly as you interact with the system, you can realize, hey, this thing doesn't have a lot of common sense, right? And so the system we have today are really limited, and I don't believe anybody has a good view as to when we'll match human intelligence, but it's not gonna happen in the next decade, not gonna happen in the next 2 or 3 decades. It's gonna take much longer. How long? I don't know. But let's not give the impression that it's around the corner. I think it will be a disservice to everybody. So that's my first point. The second is I'm trying to have a bit on a crusade around this term AGI. I think it's a very misleading term. I don't even know what it stands for. It actually stands for artificial general intelligence. But what people don't realize is that human intelligence, it's not general. It's actually very, very specific to our world. It's very biased. It's really customized to survival human on our planet. So the concept of general intelligence, I mean, yes, humans tend to have a more general intelligence than the computers today, but there's no such thing as a general intelligence. And it's not saying even that if you reach human level intelligence that you will get to something like the singularity, or you'll get some things that are going to keep improving itself. So people throw a lot in that term. Sometimes they mean human intelligence, which is not a good term for it because human intelligence is not general. And sometimes they're trying to imply that, hey, it's going to be like the end of all, like it's going to be like, solving every problem by solving that general intelligence. So I find the term quite misleading, and I'm trying to get people to stop adopting it. And really my point by raising these two things is I do believe that AI today has some really, really critical issues, right? And you don't need to project yourself in this future where you're going to have the singularity or you're going to have human intelligence to face this problem. I mean, today, we need to create systems that have, less biases. We need to create systems that are more inclusive, like that work as well for everybody on the planet and not based on your skin color or your race or where you come from. We need to create systems that are robust. It's quite difficult actually to create AI systems that are robust. I'm not going to create a car that's going to run into the side of the road, all of a sudden. So, and they need to be transparent, that give a view to people that they can have enough control over. So this problem, which actually you could project 30 years from now when AI reach AGI, where, it's going to be computers taking over the world. Well, you don't need to, think of computer taking over the world to try to start addressing this problem now. So that's what bugs me in this whole debate, is that as we're projecting to a future that's very far away and not real for today, we're forgetting that, hey, there are real problems today. When we put AI in a car, we need to make sure this AI is going to be quite robust before we put it on the road out there. When we put AI to do moderation, right, we need to make sure that it does that without too many biases and fairly for everybody, right? So these are really, really difficult problems. And this is the problem we should talk about now. That's the real debate. And it will lead to actually protecting us against, potential side effects in the far future, but they are a real problem today.
Yeah. And to this point, last question from me, because I want to turn to the question from the group. in terms of today, and you have a great background as an entrepreneur. Like, what's interesting for startups to work on? Is that AI ops, machine learning infrastructure? Is that AI applications? What are some of the interesting areas?
I think we're at a moment, in my opinion, where the capabilities of AI are way below the applications of AI. So I really encourage startups to go on the application side. There are actually two fields that I'm very passionate about. Doesn't mean I think they're, if I always ask myself, I'm an entrepreneur, so I always ask myself, hey, if I would start a company today, what would I do? One is really back to a bit the previous company I was in, Benevolent, which is AI and science. I do think that AI-assisted science has a huge future ahead of us. That it's chemistry, biology, physics, leveraging AI system to make better discovery is something that's going to really break through in the coming years. I mean, even my team came up with some just leveraging like these transformer models, for proteins, and it's amazing how well it works. My team also applied transformer models to mathematics, doing like things like partial derivation equation or integration, and showing that, hey, it could work as well or better than Mathematica or some 100-page long algorithm. So there's really, really interesting aspects around AI and scientific discovery. The second I'm also very passionate is around creativity. Can AI help people be a lot more creative? The way I talk about it is, can AI, help people become artists without having to have the technique, spending the 10,000 hours mastering a technique, they make them really creative, really fast, without the the barrier to entry that art often has, and also opening new realm of creativity, right? Multimodality stories like you see on Instagram or TikTok. This new concept of creative expression. I'm really bullish about this, but I think right now, if I were a startup, I would really go really much on this application side, because I think the technology, even if you assume no research will happen in the next 10 years, there's still so much that can be done. And then it keeps improving, right? So that means it keeps giving new advances that we don't quite know how to leverage at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. All right, thank you so much. Let's switch to some of those questions. Maybe Jack, you want to take the first one?
Yeah, I can hop in here. Great chat, guys. So this one comes from Antonio. He asks, how important is a company how important is it to have data literacy across the organization before implementing advanced AI projects? And I guess a quick follow on, Jerome, how do you spread data literacy or AI literacy across Facebook? Any tips and tricks there?
That's a really good question. Actually, I have my standard presentation where I always start like this, especially when I try to advise company, which is, before you talk about AI, you should talk about data, and you should talk about data analytics, sometimes data science. I actually always refer to the number of data scientists within Facebook. So actually, to give you an idea, there are as many data scientists in Facebook as there are product managers, right? And so to answer your second question, I didn't have to do anything because this was the state of the company when I arrived, right? It's an extremely data-driven organization that brings huge value to data and also to data-driven decision-making, right? So my advice to everybody is, yes, you need to get to that structure a lot more than actually adopting AI sometime. And I think that's the biggest bottleneck to adopting AI, to not have a data driven organization, both from keeping the data, evaluating, keeping it clean and useful, and then making decision. That's the hardest, right? Making decisions based on data. And really the key there, at a place like Facebook, you cannot come up with a recommendation without actually supporting it with the data, either in the user research or the analysis of what's happening on the system. So that's the first step before, that's really the ground to make an organization ready for AI.
That's great, thank you. Another question from Raphael in the Q&A, and just a quick note for everyone listening in, if you have a question, please use the Q&A portal at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to as many as possible. But Raphael asks, I agree combating bias in AI is a big issue. Earlier you mentioned how BlenderBot was trained on sources like Reddit in an unsupervised way. How do you prevent a bot like BlenderBot to not reflect the biases one might find in Reddit threads? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. So I would not advise to train a production bot on Reddit. It definitely gives it some flavor, but the team actually, I refer back to the papers from the team because they're actually spending a lot of time on this. It's also about creating like specific objectives around debiasing the data. You know, there's like data around genders, for example. So try to really change the objective function, especially on some subtasks, to make sure that the system, you know, optimized for being as the least biased possible. Now, you know, bias is a really complicated subject because intelligence itself is by nature biased, right? It's our bias towards, you know, making really quick inferences and understanding the world without having all the necessary information, right? So you cannot go at it and say, hey, bias in itself is a bad thing, but you need to figure out what bias is acceptable versus what bias is not acceptable, you know? And we know, obviously, many biases that are not acceptable, and you need to make sure that you can control, check, monitor the system, and also train them to optimize for debiasing themselves.
That's great, thank you. Matt, do you want to take the next one, or you want me to ask another one from the chat?
Keep going. I'm just accessing now.
So an anonymous attendee writes in, hi Jerome, there's a brilliant write-up by Michael Jordan, not the Last Dance one, the one from UC Berkeley, on why he thinks the AI terminology is abused. He believes that we have it, what we have is at best IA, intelligent automation, and not AI. Given all that, why do we still have widespread usage of the AI terminology, even by experts in the field? What are your thoughts?
I disagree with this one. You know, it's the standard paradox, right? That every time AI solves the problem, then it's no longer AI, right? So it's no longer intelligent because it's simple. I mean, believe me, like if you interact with something like BlenderBot, or if you look at the advances we do in image recognition and image segmentation, I mean, I will call it AI. I have no problem with this, so I kind of disagree with this. It's definitely a level of performance that we're not expecting 10 years ago. I mean, and games is the same, right? I mean, the fact that we can beat the best master in Go, that was also unexpected, came much faster. So I think that's part of intelligence. It's not the whole intelligence. And I think what people underestimate is the complexity of human intelligence and all the dimension of human intelligence. So that I would completely agree that we are still very far from human intelligence. We have some pieces of it. As we said, Facebook, we're really 1% done. So we are just looking at a sliver of intelligence, but I will qualify it as intelligence. I do think the system qualifies for it.
Great, thank you.
One question from an anonymous attendee. Other firms have published a number of AI data sets for large-scale learning models. What is Facebook's position on this? On publishing data sets.
It's actually surprisingly difficult to do well. I mean, so first, I think it's really important, but it needs to be done well, and it's really hard to do well. So you cannot just like publish some pointer to some data and then let people, oh, go download the data. And then you realize, well, actually, do I have the rights for that data? Okay. And I cannot tell you how much effort we put in putting this deepfake data set on the hateful meme. Because initially we were like, oh, okay, we have access to all this data in Facebook. Let's leverage it. Well, did we ask user for their permission to use it? You know, will they be okay? And so we actually ended up generating from scratch many of these data sets. So I do think it's quite important for companies to come up with data sets. It's a lot more complicated than people think it is, and you have to be a lot more responsible about it, right? You cannot just take like, oh, this user put their videos out there, I can use it for whatever I want. It doesn't work like this. You need to be very responsible, very careful. And that ended up for us being that we actually, you know, investing in recreating data sets specifically for the research community from scratch.
A more technical question from Ofer. How do you detect drifts and ongoing performance of your AI models?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. Actually, I'll tell you my little trick this one is that I have a very, very good data science team as part of my overall team. And they are actually creating systems. So my little joke I had in my organization, sometimes people who are good ML engineers or practitioners or AI scientists are not very good data scientists, okay? And this is a very good data scientist question. And so for me is that I have actually a very strong data science team that builds actually tooling to detect this drift. And you want to do it in live system, right? So you always try to connect the performance of your system. I mean, it's much more convenient to have offline system, but we always try to connect the offline performance to online performance and always try to link the performance of the UI system, like the change in model, and to see the performance over time to your online data and to the live system. Very, very interesting problem, a very good idea, and not easy at all to do. And another good reason to recruit a lot of good data scientists, even before you recruit your ML scientists and engineers.
I had one question, I believe from Joshua Bloom. So if you're talking about the same Joshua Bloom, former speaker at Data Driven when he was founder of Wise.io, and then went to GE Digital and a professor at UC Berkeley. So on deep fakes, one danger is a blending of an individual image with one another. This has been shown to strongly sway preference in the context of political candidate selection, for example. Does Facebook ban the personalization of advertisement along this axis?
Okay, I don't think I can answer. That's a really tricky question. Okay, and I don't have all the policies in mind, you know, and I wouldn't venture to actually give. So obviously we have a very strong view on political ads, but there are limits, right? So as to what you can do, and some of them are banned. For example, if the ad would say something that would be dangerous for people to follow, or would be a threat to their health, or such a thing. So there are limits, and I think there were new statements also that are made around how much you can use modified or content for that. But I don't have all the detail, and I'm not sure I understood the question in the detail enough. Happy to do that offline.
Good. One question from Atakan, more about I guess the most interesting techniques that you may be experimenting with. So specifically, so in which category are you expecting the new GAN-like step forward in text and visual modalities? Is it going to be reinforcement learning, like few shots method for maybe, or unsupervised learning, or something else? So I guess
the one thing right now, and I started to be pretty vocal about it, is, and and obviously has been pushing this for the past few years, is that self-supervised learning is really showing promises everywhere. You know, so it's obviously that's the technique behind large language models, but my team came out with new papers around vision. So we believe actually that these techniques will supersede the fields, you know, in pretty much every area. So self-supervision really is the way to go. It doesn't mean that it doesn't combine with some amount of supervision, but some pre-training based on self-supervision is really the future in pretty much every area.
Actually, one interesting question I think about a lot as well from Jason. Do you have any advice in deploying AI and ML capabilities for non-technical stakeholders in the B2B enterprise space? So, you know, basically the question of like the democratization of AI, beyond the chosen few, the Facebooks and the Googles that have all the data and all the, access to all the top researchers. Like, how do people deploy AI and ML?
That's a good question, right? So I think AI is still a fairly technical field. So I do believe that many people can use and deploy AI today, right? It's not a question of like having huge resources and data and all. I mean, you can see like, there's a small company like Hugging Face making all these models available for everybody, really reducing the barrier to entry for people to use the system. So I don't buy the idea that, hey, people cannot use that, but it's still a fairly technical space, right? I would not go down the path. I think it's like, if you remember, and if you're old enough, like 20, 30 years ago, people were like, hey, programming, it will be accessible to business users in 5 years, in 10 years. Never happened. I don't buy that AI will be accessible to people who don't have a programming background anytime soon, right? So, but it will be part of, machine learning will be part of the tool set of any programmers, but it will still be, for kind of more of the developer type to develop this system rather than a point and click system, right? But I do believe that any developers today can leverage machine learning pretty efficiently as long as they understand the base concepts.
We have a couple of questions on rare events, which is an interesting discussion, right? Especially there's been a lot of like write-up about how COVID sort of broke the machine learning models because the current situation was not reflected in prior data sets. So one question from Mark, what are your thoughts on the potential for AI to identify and classify rare events or objects that require highly specialized language or expertise, which is a variation of that?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say, right, is that sometimes now you hear these things like, oh, AI failed because it didn't solve X. I'm like, nobody ever said that AI could solve every problem, right? I mean, we're at the stage right now where AI applications are expanding, exploding, but it's still a fraction of what humanity can do, right? So I wouldn't always put the expectation. And I do agree with you that, hey, things where you have rare events, given that AI today learns from prior data and historical data, are not best suited for AI at the moment. Now we are trying to create a system that can react to them and can learn from little data, but that I would say is still pretty exploratory, right? So AI in many ways is a system that kind of reproduces the past at the moment, and that's the nature of it, and that's a known limitation. But that's okay, right? It's a known limitation. I'm not claiming that you can solve every problem with AI. That's not at all the case.
Question from Morgan. Can you comment on Facebook's vision for ONNX? Is the goal to make this an industry standard neural network format?
It's interesting. So it's Onyx, right?
Onyx, yeah, I can never pronounce this.
I mean, we have multiple approaches. We're definitely going all in as PyTorch, end to end. So I think initially when we launched the Onyx strategy, it was more like a multi-framework world, and we had actually 2 framework internally between PyTorch and Café2. But we're still supporting Onyx, as there are many actually partners who leverage it. So first of all, Microsoft is a big proponent of Onyx, and so they have their own serving platform that's based on Onyx. So it's a useful translation layer. I think it's an option that we offer as part of PyTorch. It's not a necessary thing. You can also go all in from research to production just on PyTorch. But both paths we support at the moment.
All right, how long do we have? Okay, we could probably take like a couple more. Let's see a question from Raphael. I agree, combating bias in AI is a big issue. Earlier you mentioned how BlenderBot was trained on sources like Reddit in an unsupervised way.
Oh, Matt, we already discussed this one.
We already discussed that one. Apologies. Do you want to take the next one, Jack? Maybe if you had some queued up. I'm just reading all of this in live.
Yeah, sure. I can hop in here. So from Michael, how do you balance explainable AI and AI that performs better but more difficult to explain? What are the implications of your position? And doesn't it work become more or less AI/ML driven based on what position the org takes?
Yeah, I mean, I think explainable AI is a really interesting topic. I tend to prefer like the term transparent than explainable. I don't think that it's necessary to have system that you can explain all the way, like programs that we use every day, right? I mean, you're not going to go in the code, even though if you could read it, you're not going to go in there. But I think having systems that are transparent is quite important. And you want to make sure people understand what the system is optimizing, for example, right? The data that they can use, the criteria, like the robustness that it has. So it's a really emerging field. I think we don't understand it really well. I think there's a lot of user research that needs to be done. Like, how do you give trust in AI system to people? What does that mean for them? Again, people trust other people, right? They interact with other people. Other people are not explainable. They're not very transparent either. So what is the expectation for AI system? I definitely believe that we need to make a lot more research and effort in that area, at least to understand how the system, like what it optimized for, what data it used, what are its constraints, and how well it works, okay? But it's still very much a field of research.
Thank you.
All right, maybe one last one. We have a lot of questions, so obviously we're not going to be able to go through all of this. I mean, we literally have dozens and dozens of questions, which is fantastic. Jack, do you want to pick one last one?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Oh, here we go. From Adam Levinson to close us out. How does Facebook think about build versus buy decisions related to AI? What's Facebook willing to outsource versus from third parties?
It's a good question. I mean, in some way, there's no like constraint, and we tend to leverage a lot what the community develops. I'd say we tend to not buy a lot of AI system out there because we're so much at the edge that it's hard to find something that satisfies our requirements. But we do leverage a lot of external research, right? And bring it in and compare it and sometimes integrate it. So, so we don't buy a lot, but I'm always at the, I think we don't license a lot. We do look at a lot of companies out there, and I've done quite a few acquisitions. So I would say that's more. We try to be completely at the edge in AI in everything we do. So
thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you, Matt. Thanks for your time, and thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was wonderful, super interesting. Really appreciate the time, the insights, and all of this. Thanks to everyone who attended, submitted great questions. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but really appreciate it. Thanks to my co-organizers as well. And we'll do this soon, hopefully. And yeah, we should have this chat from today on video at some point soon as well. We'll share it with the group at Data Driven. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.